All right, welcome to Tanya Summary Shiur. It's week 45, K'nai Nahara, and we're doing chapters 21, 22, and a smidge of 23 from the fourth part of Tanya, from Igar Kodesh. You might hear the birds chirping, you might hear a garage door or two opening. These are the sounds of the wild here in Brooklyn, New York. I'm in the sukkah, it's the Yom Tov Sukkos, so hopefully it won't give away if I'm doing like a cut and edit or something like that. But anyway, without any further ado, let us start on this past week's Tanya. So, in chapter 21, the Alter Rebbe essentially extols two virtues which can be used in the mitzvah of giving tzedakah. So the first virtue that he extols is the virtue of zizos. Now, I'm not good with the English translations. I honestly thought people translated zizos as zealousness, but apparently not. Apparently it's better translated as agility, dexterity, quickness, expedition, promptness. I say with a whole list of translations from Google Translate. But zizos typically means that you do it quickly, willingly, with skill, however you want to translate it. Anyone that wants can go on Google Translate and translate the word zizos, and it seems like all of the translations over there are decent. So essentially, to do tzedakah with zizos, and to explain the midah of zizos, the Alter Rebbe says that Avraham Avinu sacrificed his only son, which is a very big thing. We mention it every day in davening, at least in Chabad. We say the whole story, and definitely in many circles it's common to mention Avraham Avinu's sacrifice on a daily basis. And a person may wonder, says Alter Rebbe, what's so great about what Avraham Avinu did? Because however great it is, many people throughout the centuries, the millennium that have passed since Avraham Avinu sacrificed, many people have lost more than one child. So the Alter Rebbe says that what made Avraham Avinu's sacrifice so great was the fact that he himself had zizos about it. He was almost excited. He did it with agility, with dexterity, whatever you want to call it. He got up in the morning, he saddled his own donkey, he said, guys, let's go, let's get a move on. We need to go fulfill what Hashem said. Even though this would be losing the apple of his eye, his son, his heir, the person that would inherit his physical and his spiritual fortune, the child that he waited for 100 years for, literally 100 years. I can't even imagine. And all of that he was willing to give up in a heartbeat, in a moment's notice, because Hashem said. And not only was he willing to give it up, but he was willing to give it up completely. He was using his everything. He was using all of his skill, all of his dexterity, all of his agility. He was using it towards doing what Hashem wanted. These translations are not working with the context, but the point is that he fully invested himself in giving over his main child. He had another kid, long story over there in Chumash Reishis, see there. But ultimately, that was what made his sacrifice so great. The fact that he didn't just accept it, but he participated with deftness. So the Alter Rebbe says we can take a lesson from this. We can give tzedakah with this zizus, with this deftness. We can, instead of saying we need to give tzedakah because we need to give tzedakah, and Hashem said, and Oivei Nebach that Hashem said. No, we can say Hashem gave us the opportunity that we could help out a fellow Jew. Hashem gave us the opportunity that we could do a mitzvah with money, and as such, we could be excited to give tzedakah. We could have the midah of zizos in giving tzedakah. So that is one midah that the Alter Rebbe extols the virtue of in giving tzedakah. The second midah is very interesting. It's a very gavra chefza kind of vart, but this is a summary. I'm not going to start getting into all the particulars. But the point is that the Alter Rebbe says giving tzedakah many times is also a good thing when it comes to giving tzedakah. Giving tzedakah, giving 10 dimes instead of giving $1, there's a very big advantage in giving 10 dimes. And the reason why is because every time that a person gives tzedakah, they're refining themselves. There's a baseline amount of refinement that happens when a person gives tzedakah. Not only that, but it also causes that there's a mitzvah that's done every time that a person gives tzedakah. It is true that we do care about the dollar amount. It's not to say that giving 10 dimes is better than giving, $1,000. But there is an advantage that giving 10 times, no matter the amount, has over any large amount. There's a certain amount of mitzvahs that are done every time that a person gives tzedakah. So it's a great advantage. So the Alter Rebbe also encourages the concept of not just giving, but to give routinely, even if it's smaller amounts per se. it's still good to give routinely. There's an advantage in that. So, zirzus and giving often. Those are the two takeaways from this chapter. And with that, we conclude chapter 21, and we can move on to chapter 22. In chapter 22, we take kind of a turn from sukkah, and we start talking about the concept of going to a Rebbe to ask for advice. Now, it's very interesting. The Alter Rebbe actually says, why are you doing this? He says, I'm not a Navi. He's not talking about himself necessarily in the first person, but he says, I need to ask you guys the concept of going to a tzaddik to ask for advice about business and things like that. Not advice about spiritual things. That it makes sense. But to go to tzaddikim about advice for business, he says, where does this come from? He has a little bit of a pshatel about the concept of going to a Navi for advice. It's only dafka a Navi, like Shmuel HaNavi, that Shaul went to him to ask for about his donkeys that he lost. He wanted to know where they were, so he went to an actual Navi. But being a Yer Shemayim, being a tzaddik, doesn't mean that you suddenly know every single thing in the world. Doesn't mean that you know how the stock market's going to work. So the Alter Rebbe kind of says, I'll deflect the whole concept in a very interesting way. He says, if you're asking me for advice, he doesn't say outright necessarily that anyone's asking him for advice, but it's very heavily implied. And we know this is a thing that was done, this is a thing that is done. There's still people that go to the Ohel in Queens now and write letters to the Rebbe many decades after his passing, asking for business advice. So it's definitely still a thing that goes on. But the Alter Rebbe says, I'll deflect this concept by saying, if you're coming to me for advice, then I'll give you my advice, the advice that I can give you. He says, people are probably asking me for advice about business because business is suffering. They're probably not saying, wow, I'm doing fantastic, let me go to the Rebbe to ask for advice. It's because things are suffering. So he says, contemplate the reason behind the business suffering. He says you should consider suffering in business, or other kinds of suffering in general, the concept applies all around, as a rebuke from Hashem. That when Hashem, it's like when a father rebukes a child, the child might cry. It's hard to get rebuke from a parent, but ultimately the father is only trying to help the child, and is trying to help the child grow in a good way. And that's why the father is rebuking the child. So in a similar way, we should contemplate that any suffering that happens is really Hashem that's trying to direct us in a good way. We might not see it, we might not appreciate it, the same way that a child might not appreciate it when the parent rebukes them. But ultimately, we should know, and we should try to internalize the fact that whatever it is that's going on is really for our own good in the long run. He says we should further contemplate that Hashem could say like this person did things wrong. Now, I don't really care. I just care about mitzvahs, and I just care about Averis. And ultimately, this person, their mitzvahs outweigh their Averis. So I'll let this person alone. I'll let them continue to be, not going to say a bad person per se, but I'm going to let them continue to have bad midas, bad netiyos, bad leanings. And I'll let them go on their way. And ultimately, the sum total of whatever it is that they're doing, it'll be good, and they'll get into Gan Eden, and that'll be that. I'll fulfill all my debts, and I'll be done. Hashem could have said that. But Hashem says, no, I care about my Yidden. I care about my people. I love them. And as such, it's not enough for me to say that I'll fulfill my baseline contractual obligation towards them, and I'll just give them some reward for whatever mitzvahs they do, and let the Averis counter them the mitzvahs, and ultimately there will be some lump sum of mitzvahs that's greater than the lump sum of Averis, and I'll give them some small amount of reward, and that'll be that. No, Hashem says, I love them, and therefore I'm going to rebuke them. I'm going to let them go through some suffering in life, so they'll become better people. They'll be changed as people. They'll grow from whatever the experience is. And the Alter Rebbe says we should appreciate this. We should look at this like a father that a son comes home from the bar drunk, covered in vomit, and the father himself washes off the son. This is what's going on when a person suffers, that Hashem loves them and Hashem is invested in bringing them to a point where they'll change as people, even though it might be hard, difficult, challenging, painful. But this is what it is, and in the long run, a person can strive to see retroactively what it is that made them need to suffer. The Alter Rebbe says a person can think about their averis, can think about their bad midas, and to think what it is that they need to change, and ultimately they can grow from their experience. They can become genuinely better people from it. So this is what the Alter Rebbe encourages, that we should look at experiences, negative experiences, and to try to grow from them, try to appreciate the growth that comes from them. because ultimately that's what negative experiences are for. They're so that we can grow from them. In continuing the letter, the Alter Rebbe kind of shifts from that topic. It's possible that this letter was in response to a letter which addressed multiple topics. The Alter Rebbe encourages davening with great strength, and he makes some cryptic remarks. I'll do my best job at interpreting them, but ultimately it seems like what he's saying is that a person needs to try to give themselves over to Hashem in davening in a way that completely transcends rationality, in a way to just completely give oneself over to Hashem. And he implies that this giving over to Hashem in turn brings down many blessings that are also above the norm of what's supposed to come down from above. The Alter Rebbe then encourages Avas Yisrael to an extreme. He says that all Yidden are like one body, and you can't have fighting body parts in one body. I mean, it's not healthy to have fighting body parts in one body. And he says every person should view themselves as being lower than everyone else, so we could have humility to have true Avas Yisrael, that if the other person is better than you, then you wanna be close to him, or her, or them. And he encourages everyone to stay away from Lashon Hara. He says it's worse than Avodah Zarah, Gilei Rayis, Shfichas Damim. Lashon Hara is a very horrible thing. Gossip is a very horrible thing. And he encourages to stay away from it to the extreme. My guess about this would be that it has something to do with quarrels with the Misnagdim, that Misnagdim were very Misnagid, they were very against the Hasidim, and unfortunately Hasidim took it to heart sometimes, so the Alter Rebbe strongly encouraged to not take anything personally. This isn't the only letter like this, it's also the theme of the second letter from this section of letters from part 4 of Tanya. So the Alter Rebbe is encouraging again that we should have only Avos Yisrael. We shouldn't Chas v'Shalom speak Lashon Hara. We shouldn't Chas v'Shalom look at ourselves as better than anyone. We should only try to appreciate our fellow Yidden, and we should try to be united with them. So that concludes chapter 22, and we barely started chapter 23 yesterday, and we're going to finish chapter 23 over the course of this next week in Hashem, along with chapter 24. But the beginning of chapter 23 was essentially, the Alter Rebbe said, I'm going to explain to you the concept of the greatness of a minyan. So not necessarily a minyan for davening, a minyan for learning as well. The concept of a minyan is a very special concept, says the Alter Rebbe. And he says the reason for this is because the concept of a minyan, 10 halachic people that are able to join together to constitute a minyan, a quorum of 10 people. So this brings down the Shekhinah, says the Alter Rebbe. And he says this is different from the concept of spiritual reward. And that's what chapter 23 is ultimately going to be about. And with that, we conclude what we learned from this past week. So I guess a little bit of a spoiler for this week. In chapter 23, we are going to finish this concept of Hashem about a quorum of 10. What's the difference between bringing down the Shekhinah and spiritual reward? And also we're going to be talking more about davening in chapter 24. Hashem, looking forward. Have a good Yom Tov, good Moed, good Shabbos, everything that's coming. Kol Tov.